All right, put some charge in the car. Now I'm ready to go. Yep, that's right. I drive an electric car, and it's really cool. Really cool. It's not a Tesla. It's a Nissan Leaf. It's quiet. Drives nice. Easy to maneuver. And the best thing about it is I get to drive it for free. No gas. The time of day charger that I get, or the meter that I get that allows me to charge about 18 cents a kilowatt between midnight and 5 o'clock in the morning, we put on one of the bigger buildings at the apartment complex, and it actually reduced our electric usage, our cost for the electricity at the complex. So I get that for free. It's pretty cool. And then I get to fill up at quick chargers all over town for free. As far as I know now, it's indefinite. Originally, they had said that they would pay for it, Nissan would pay for it for 2 years, but it's been 2 years and I still get free power. And one of the interesting things about these cars, if you think it's interesting, I don't know, is that the battery will take the charge quickest when it's less than 2/3 full. So if I run it down to 5%, and go to a quick charger, it'll take the full 400 amps and 200 volts for up to 66%, and then it starts dropping off. And I noticed that quickly when I was charging up the car, and I seem to be the only person that I know driving these cars who's noticed that. Everybody else is like, wants to get the maximum amount of time on the charger that they can. And even when it's not pulling very many watts, they will still sit there and use it their full time allotment. I get it, you pay for the time, you want to get the time. My concern has been that that last little bit of power, that last third of the battery, doesn't want to accept the power as fast, probably for a reason. I suspect that it probably gets a little hot, and that's why it slows down. And heat is what is the bad thing for these batteries. But noticing those kinds of things is something that I've always done naturally. Notice when something isn't quite right, or when something shifts, or when it's different today than it was yesterday. Sometimes I can't explain it. I get it intuitively. And I've always been that way with like math and observing stuff. And what I've realized over the years is that my brain is very good at building networks within itself to build relationships between ideas. And it's helped me to learn better when I've learned how to look for those relationships. Some of the things that I have studied, are completely off the wall, things that you would never think that I would enjoy studying. One of my fondest memories was when I had to take Mexican history in undergrad, and I wasn't exactly looking forward to taking Mexican history. I had enough trouble with American history. So I went in, paid attention, got into a good study group, and I wound up getting the highest grade in the class. And it's because I forced myself to get interested in it. And that has been the key to my success as a man with what I've been calling a hyper-focused attention, HFA. But all my friends are telling me, Tom, nobody knows what that is. Yeah, I get it, because normal people don't have it, they don't understand it, and usually it causes offense whenever I try to push it. So, but I don't like to call it what everybody else calls it, because once somebody hears that I've got what everybody else wants to call it, they immediately think a learning disability, or there's something weird going on with it. Well, yeah, there's something weird for sure. My brain is wired so that it can think faster. So I had to give up a few things in order to get that speed, just like with any kind of vehicle. If you want to get more speed out of it, you got to lighten it up. So I've done a lot of studying. About every 10 years, I study up on it, see where technology is and where the learning is. And And most recently, they've identified through some live MRIs on children who are growing up with this hyper-focus ability, that their brains develop differently. And not differently in the sense that they're just warped, but differently in the sense that certain areas grow faster while other areas grow slower. Like I said, you got to give up one area in order to get an increase in the other. And the most significant difference that I think of is that the everybody's brain develops from the back to the front first. So the occipital comes online first. Your visual cortex, all that is what we get first. That's why babies always look in your eyes and learn how to do spatial stuff before they learn anything else, because that's what's coming on first. With people with ADHD, okay, I'll call it what it is, the occipital grows heavier, and the change from growth rates in the back to the front, the prefrontal cortex, goes slower. So whereas most people are developing their prefrontal cortex by about the age of 5, some of us didn't get that until we were 10 or 11. I was a classic case. I'm convinced that my prefrontal cortex didn't start coming online until I was in 6th grade. And I remember some things happening that seemed to indicate that. I began to become more socially aware in 6th grade than I had been prior to that. And that makes sense because the prefrontal cortex is where your executive rides. And I like to call him the executive because I imagine normal people having a full floor of office space up there in the prefrontal cortex. And because the executive, the CEO, began developing relationships with his prefrontal cortex and his board, he's very good friends with them. And all of his board members pretty much know what to do. If something new comes along that they don't know anything about, well, they've been working together so long that the boss will call a meeting and he'll say, okay, guys, what's going on? Well, we got this issue popped up. Oh, okay, well, does anybody have any ideas? Well, what if we did that? Well, okay, well, anything else? You know, what if we did that? Okay, well, let's think about it and take the day off, and I'm going to go play some golf, and we'll have a couple martinis, and we'll come back tomorrow and have another meeting. Okay, and so that's the way that people who have a fully developed prefrontal cortex with good executive skills operate and think about things. They're slow, deliberate, and they base their decisions on what they know and what their executive board knows. So their executive board acts like filters and instigators and drivers. So the executive doesn't really have to do anything anymore except sit in his plushy office in his leather chair and tell everybody else what. My guy up in my executive area is more like an entrepreneur. He runs around from job to job, he's never in the office. He's got a secretary sitting in there taking notes, but he doesn't answer his phone half the time. Nobody in their right mind would want to be ADHD. It is what they call it, attention deficit disorder. It's got 2 bad words in the name. Attention deficit disorder. Just because you daydream and find the things going on inside your head more interesting than what the teacher's doing on the drawing board, the chalkboard, means that you have a disorder. So, okay, that's fine. But the reality is that when we focus in on something, when we like something, we do it better than anybody else. We are able to bring in this brain power, and because it doesn't have to go through the executive offices first, the entrepreneur is able to just run around and say, okay, let's do that, and that. And usually, it's the right answer. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't believe it. So, it's interesting to note that a lot of CEOs, a lot of presidents, especially our current one, a lot of artists, a lot of people who have their own compass are ADHD. And our society needs to recognize them earlier and recognize them for the ability that they have, and to not ostracize them, to not cut them out, to not send them to special ed where they can learn how to retread tires. No, they need to be challenged. And if I had been challenged as a kid with having the opportunity to learn at the speed I can learn at, then I would have been, a genius. It just wasn't recognized. It just wasn't trained. And my dad recognized it, and he did the best that he could. But and he did very well, I think. Never had to take drugs. Just a couple of cups of coffee, and that's usually enough. It's usually enough to get me focused, so that I can then use it. But that's it for today. Next time I'll talk about the second of the four things that goes on inside our brain. All right, take care, bye-bye.